I have been telling you that this morning we're going to start a new series of messages taken from the book of the Revelation. And I've chosen a title, one that's probably familiar to many of you. When I was trying to think, what could I title an introduction to the book of the Revelation, a movie title came to mind. Now, I haven't seen the movie, probably many of you have. It's an older one, I think. It's entitled Back to the Future. Back to the future. That's what we want to do beginning this morning. Take a look at the future. Let's go back to the future. Now you say, how can you do that? Well, we can do it because the book of Revelation predicts the future, tells us what's going to happen, and all we got to do is go back to the book and we'll know the future. Wouldn't you like to know the future, what's coming? Now some of you may have been saying in your minds, oh no, the book of Revelation. Oh, that's a toughie. He's going to lose me. I just know that book is so hard and so confusing, and I'm never going to be able to sit through all of this, you know. Now let me tell you my goals. I've got 3 goals in teaching the book of Revelation, preaching the book of Revelation. First of all, I've got the goal of simplicity. I want to make it as simple as I possibly can so that everybody that's here can say, I think now I know what that's saying, what that's about, what he's trying to say. I'm going to try to make it just as simple as I can. Second, I want to make it clear. I want to be able to say to you, here's what this teaches. Doesn't mean this, doesn't mean that. Here's what it means. I want to make it clear to you so that when you get done, you're not saying, boy, the book of Revelation, that's as clear as mud. You know, I don't understand anything. I want you to understand it. Thirdly, I want it to be practical. There are some lessons and truths that we can learn from this book that will be very practical. Even though it's a book of prophecy talking about the future, there are some things that we're going to learn about this book that we can put into practice right today. Now, I want to get you acquainted with the book this morning. I want to whet your appetite to have you read it, study it on your own, and come prepared. And also, I remind you that there is much confusion about this book. It is misunderstood. It is misinterpreted. It is neglected. That ought not to be the case for us. Now, by the way, this is the first time I have ever preached a whole series through the book of Revelation. This will be a first for me. I have preached different passages, the 7 churches, and verses here and there, but I've never taken the book as a whole and developed a series of messages as I've done this time. Let me give you a little background. The book of the Revelation was written by John. We're told that in the very first verse. John wrote it. Now, who's the John? He doesn't give a last name. He doesn't give any title. He was evidently so well known among the people that he didn't need to say anything other than John. And they knew who it was. There's no question it was the Apostle John. All of church history and tradition agrees that John wrote this book. He wrote it while he was in a penal institution, a penal camp. He was out on an island. Because of his faith in Christ, he was put on this island along with others. It was kind of a Roman penal colony out in the Aegean Sea. It was a small island, 10 miles by 5 miles. And there John was on the island because he was trusting in Christ and preaching Jesus. He was banished to this island. And it was while he was on this island, and he was very old. He was probably up close or into his 90s when he wrote this. You'd think the Roman government would have said, oh, such an old man, he can't do any damage. Why send him off to prison? You know, let him die where he is. But no, they banished him to this island of Patmos. And while he's on this island, John receives a series of revelations from God. Sometimes visions, sometimes voices, but they come to John sometimes through an angel. As a matter of fact, mostly through an angel that brings these messages to John. Now, he wasn't just making this up. He was told to write it down. We have it in written form. And God said, John, I want you to make this known to everybody. Don't seal it up. You remember, there's one book in the Old Testament, the book of Daniel, that after Daniel wrote that book, and it was a book of prophecy, God said to Daniel, now Daniel, seal up the book until the time of the end. In other words, people are not going to understand the book of Daniel fully until the time toward the end of the age. But when John wrote his book, God didn't say that. God said to him, John, don't seal up this book. This is not a book that people ought to be afraid of. As a matter of fact, notice the title of the book. Now, if you have your Bible, probably at the top, you may have The Revelation of St. John the Divine. I think that's a poor title. It really ought to be from verse 1. Let me read verse 1. The Revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, it's written by John, but it's really the revelation of Jesus Christ. Now, notice it's singular. Sometimes we call it the book of Revelations, plural. It's really one book with several revelations in it, several visions in it, but it's one revelation in a sense. It's all one picture, and it's a picture of Jesus Christ. I want you to get the theme of the book of the Revelation this morning. The theme is the revelation of Jesus Christ in all his glory. We're going to see Jesus pictured as he's not pictured other places in the New Testament. Sometimes he's pictured as the suffering Savior, but here he's going to be pictured as the sovereign Lord, the King of Kings, the Lord of Lords. This book is a book of prophecy. Notice verse 3 of the first chapter. Let me read it to you. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things which are written therein, for the time is at hand. You will note it is a book of prophecy, but it is not a book primarily about the tribulation and the millennium. It's a book about Jesus. I recognize that over half of the book deals with the period of the tribulation time that's coming on earth. A lot of the material is about that, but that's not the theme of the book. The theme is Jesus Christ in his glory, and let's not miss that. It is the only completely prophetic book in the New Testament, and it is not sealed up. As a matter of fact, go to the end chapter, chapter 22. Let me read one verse for you to remind you that this book is to be an open book. It's a revelation. It's not a hiding, it's an opening up. Listen to verse 10. And he saith unto me, seal not the sayings of the prophecy of this book, for the time is at hand. Don't tell people not to read this. Don't try to make it mysterious and so they'll not understand it. Let it be known. It's a revelation. It's not a hiding. It's not a revealing or a hiding of Christ. It's a revealing of it. Don't miss that. And I want you to notice, too, that it's for believers and not unbelievers. This book was not written as a book to try to get people to be saved and to believe in Jesus. That's not the main purpose of the book. You say, how do I know that? Well, listen to verse 1. The revelation of Jesus Christ, which God gave unto him, to show unto his servants the things which must shortly come to pass. Notice that, his servants, God's children, those that love God. It is a revealing for us to know something. How did John get the message? That whole verse tells us. God gave it to him, meaning Christ. Christ then toward the end of the verse, sent it and signified it by his angel. He sent it by an angel unto his servant John. So it comes from God through Christ, through an angel to John. And then finally, to us. It's for us. It's a book for you and me. Let me give you a little outline of the book. You want to know how the book fits? Go to verse 19. First chapter, verse 19. Here's, in a sense, is an outline of the whole book. Let me read it. Write the things which thou hast seen, and the things which are, and the things which shall be hereafter. There it is. There's three divisions. The things which you've seen, and I believe that's going to be chapter 1, a vision that he sees. The things which are, that's evidently chapters 2 and 3, where he's told to write these letters to the churches that are in Asia Minor there, in Turkey. And then beginning in chapter 4, it is the things which shall be hereafter. The future events to come. Chapter 4, to the end of the book. Now that's a simple outline. I hope you can remember that. Keep that in mind so that you know the book. As we begin, let me tell you that over the years, people have taken different approaches to the book of Revelation. For example, some people have said, well, now the way I look at the book is this. It's telling about things that happened during the time of the Romans and the early Christians. And that he's just kind of giving us symbolic language to tell us what was happening back then. That's people that believe that there's no prophecy in the book, it's all history. Only it's all in symbolic terms. And then there's others that say, no, this book really is, in a sense, for the present. It's prophetic as to the history of the church. That each one of those 7 churches in the book, in chapters 2 and 3, are picturing different ages of church history. And we're now in that last age, that age of the Laodicean period. And so the way we really ought to look at the book is, it's not history, it's not future prophecy, it's history of the churches right down to the present. But no, there's a better way. I think the correct way to look at the book and to recognize that this book is future. It is prophecy of the future. It is going to tell us things that are going to happen in the future that have not yet happened. It's a mystery, but it's going to be revealed to us. We're going to learn, and I think the basic lesson of the book of the Revelation is this. Jesus is going to win. When it's all done, when time is over, when world history is ended, Jesus is going to be the victor. He's going to come and he's going to rule and reign on the earth, and he's going to be the king. That's the main point of the book. If I were to give it another division in the book, I'd call it something like this. You see the Lord pictured as, first of all, in chapters 2 and 3 as the Lord of the churches. And then and then on farther from chapter 4 down to about chapter 20, you see him as the lion over the nations. And then in the last 2 chapters, you see him as the lamb among the redeemed. Jesus is going to be pictured in many ways in this book, and we don't want to miss seeing him in the book. You say, why are we going to study it? Look at verse 3. I don't want you to miss this. The book opens and closes with a blessing for certain people. And here is a threefold blessing in verse 3. Listen to it. Blessed is he that readeth. Now, if you'll read the book, you're going to get a blessing. God promised it. That's first. Second, and they that hear the words of this prophecy. If you'll come and listen to the messages, I hope you get a blessing from it of hearing the message of the prophecy. But there's a better one. Listen. And keep those things which are written therein. That whatever you read or whatever you hear, you apply. That's where the real blessing lies. if you will listen carefully and then say, I want to do it. I want to apply it. I want to understand this. Now the word keep there, those things which are written in the book, that you will keep these things, the word keep can carry several different ideas. You may say to somebody, would you keep this book for me? Well, you mean to preserve it, to hold it, to keep it in that sense. But that's not what he's talking about when he says keep the words of this book. He doesn't mean just preserve it somewhere and lock it up and don't let anybody get to it. It's not preservation, it's observation. He means you observe it. You will keep what the book says. You'll do it, in other words. So there's blessing for you. There is also a warning given at the very end of the book. And I just ought to mention this. I don't think it's a problem to us today in this church, but we ought to know that there's a warning about people that want to tamper with this book. Listen to chapter 22, and I want to read verses 18 and 19. For I testify unto every man that heareth the words of the prophecy of this book, if any man shall add unto these things. In other words, you think you're going to change it? You're going to add some? You got another chapter you want to put in here? God shall add unto him the plagues that are written in this book. And if any man shall take away from the words of the book of this prophecy. You want to rip out a couple chapters and say, I don't believe that? Be careful. God shall take away his part out of the book of life, and out of the holy city, and from the things which are written in this book. We're not going to tamper with trying to say, well, we don't believe in this chapter or this verse. We're going to say we take it just as it is. We're not going to add verses. We're not going to take away verses. We're going to look at it just as it is. We're going to observe it. Now let me give you two basic characteristics of the book that are absolutely unique. They're different characteristics of this book than any other book in the Bible. One of these characteristics is, naturally, that it is filled with symbolic, figurative language. In other words, it's a book, I call it the two problems of the book are the visions and the vocabulary. Trying to figure out what the vision is all about and trying to figure out what the words mean that he uses. Now, when I say there's a lot of symbolic language, you know what a symbol is, don't you? A symbol is something that represents something else. The flag, either one. What's this flag represent? It represents our nation, doesn't it? See? What's that one represent? It represents the Christian church, see? And there's all kinds of symbols. You ever go into a place and they have a round circle with a dash through it and a cigarette going up like that? You know what that means, don't you? No smoking. Now that's a symbol. Corporations know the value of symbols. Let me tell you, we could just mention some. You can think of some. The moment you see that symbol, you think of, a star with the points all connected. What's that? That's Chrysler Corporation. Or you could pick out any number of symbols. A symbol is something that represents something else. And this book is going to be full of symbols. Now, fortunately for us, most of the symbols in the book are going to be interpreted for us right in the book. Whew. That's helpful. You say, show me. Okay? Go to chapter 1. Let me read verse 13. And in the midst of the 7 candlesticks, one like unto the Son of Man, clothed with a garment down to the foot, and girt about the paps with a golden girdle. Now, what's this 7 candlesticks business? Oh, well, go down to verse 20, the last part of the verse, the very end of the verse. The 7 candlesticks which thou sawest are the 7 churches. So, we know that the candlesticks, 7 of them, represent 7 churches. We're told that. See? You want another illustration? Go to chapter 5, verse 8. chapter 5, verse 8. At the end of the verse, it says, and golden vials full of odors. Now here's little bowls that are full of some incense that the smell is going up. What do they represent? Listen. Which are the prayers of saints. So we'll know when we come to that these little bowls, vials, are full of something, and it represents the prayers of the saints that go up to God. That's easy enough, isn't it? Now we could pick out others, but I just wanted to give you a few to remind you that symbols are everywhere in the book. There's one symbol that I just love, and I want to trace it through the book for just a moment. Can I take a moment and do that? Go to chapter 5 and verse 6. And it's the symbol of a lamb. Jesus is pictured throughout the book as a lamb. Now he's also pictured as a lion. In chapter 5, verse 5, he's pictured as the Lion of the tribe of Judah. But look at verse 6. And I beheld, and lo, in the midst of the throne and of the four beasts, and in the midst of the elders, stood a lamb as it had been slain. Now there's a picture of the slain lamb. Who's that? Why, that's the Son of God. That's Jesus Christ. Look down at verse 12. Here you have a picture of the worthy lamb, saying with a loud voice, worthy is the lamb that was slain to receive power and riches and wisdom and strength and honor and glory and blessing. There he's pictured as the worthy lamb. Go over to chapter 6 and verse 16, where we'll see him pictured as the wrathful lamb. Verse 16, the very last phrase. And from the wrath of the Lamb. Go to chapter 15, verse 3. We'll see him pictured here as the song of the Lamb, the one that they're singing about. Listen to verse 3. And they sing the song of Moses, the servant of God, and the song of the Lamb. He's the theme of the song. Go to chapter 19, verse 7. Here he's going to be pictured a marriage supper of the Lamb. Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come, and his wife hath made herself ready. Here the Lamb's getting married. Who's he marrying? We, the church. You and I. We're the bride. We're the church. He's the bridegroom. He's the Lamb. It's the marriage of the Lamb. Go to chapter 21. Look at verse 23. Going to need light in heaven? The New Jerusalem? And the city had no need of the sun, neither of the moon to shine in it, for the glory of God did lighten it, and the Lamb is the light thereof. Somehow there's the light of the Lamb. One more. Look at chapter 21, and I want you to see verse 27. He's got a book, too. It's called the Lamb's Book of Life. And there shall in no wise enter into it, meaning into heaven, anything that defileth, neither whatsoever worketh abomination or maketh a lie, but they which are written in the Lamb's Book of Life. There's the Lamb's Book of Life. We will be tracing the Lamb through the book of Revelation. Jesus pictured as the Lamb of God, as John said, that taketh away the sin of the world. What a beautiful picture of Jesus. Now you might ask the question, why did God give this revelation to John in symbols? Why did he do it? Why didn't he just tell him outright, this is it. Here's what it is. Why picture it in symbols? Keep your finger in Revelation and go back with me to Matthew chapter 13. I want to read 2 verses. And this relates to Jesus telling parables. It's the same thing. Why did Jesus tell stories that some people didn't understand? He tells us Matthew chapter 13. Look at verses 10 and 11. Matthew 13, 10 and 11. And the disciples came and said unto him, Why speakest thou unto them in parables? Why do you talk like this? Why do you mix up these stories and make it so difficult to understand? Here it is. He answered and said unto them, Because it is given unto you to know the mysteries of the kingdom of heaven, but to them it is not given. In other words, the reason God gave this in symbolic language to John and for us is that when we read it, we'll be able to understand it. Those that aren't believers in God and don't know Christ, they're going to read this and they're going to say, I can't understand that. That's nonsense. That's baloney. I don't get anything out of it. But you see, you and I can sit down and read this and begin to understand it, so that we can understand, but the others will remain ignorant. So that's one great truth, basic characteristic of the book. It's filled with symbols and figurative language. Now, we use figurative language all the time. You do it all the time, and we're still being literal sometimes. We say somebody eats like a horse. Well, at dinner you're going to eat like a horse? No, you're not. Not literally, but we know what you mean, And we use language like that all the time. There's nothing wrong with that. Let me give you a second characteristic of the book. Not only is it filled with figurative language, but it also speaks of future events as though they've already happened. Let me give you an illustration. Well, the Old Testament does this. You ever notice that? How the Old Testament prophets do it? I'm going to read to you from Isaiah chapter 53. Great passage in the Old Testament. Isaiah 53. Let me read it to you. Isaiah 53 verse 5. Now listen. He was wounded for our transgressions. He was bruised for our iniquities. The chastisement of our peace was upon him, and with his stripes we are healed. Now, do you know that was written 700 years before Jesus? And Isaiah is writing it as though it already happened. He says he was wounded. He didn't say he will be wounded. He said he was wounded. He puts the language as though it's future, but it's like it's already happened. Now, the book of Revelation does that over and over again. Let me give you one illustration. Go to chapter 18. Chapter 18 and verse 2. And he cried mightily with a strong voice, saying, Babylon the great is fallen, is fallen. Now he's picturing a city here, calling it Babylon. Whether it's the literal Babylon or not, we'll deal with that when we come to it. But he says, here's a city, and it's fallen. It's destroyed. It's done. But look down at verse 8. Therefore shall her plagues come in one day, death and mourning and famine, and she shall be utterly burned with fire, for strong is the Lord who judgeth her. Now here he pictures it as future. He goes back and forth as having seen it already happen and says it's done, and in the next breath he'll turn right around and say it's going to happen. So that's one of the things that's going to be unique about this book as we study it. We're going to have to recognize that sometimes he looks at prophecy as already having happened. And we'll make those distinctions when we come to it. Now, one more word as I close. Go back to chapter 1 and verse 1. Revelation 1:1. Some people, when they read this verse, they say, I don't understand this. It says here that he's going to show unto his servants the things which must shortly come to pass. Shortly. Entake is the Greek, and it means with speed. Some of you men will recognize that we get an English word from this. You have in your car a tachometer. It comes from that Greek word, take. It means, well, you know, the tachometer measures the RPMs, the revolutions per minute, you know, and you understand all that has to do with speed and velocity. That's the word. Now, it doesn't mean here that these things are going to happen right now, but it means that when they start, when these events start, it's going to be, they're going to go fast. They're going to take place in a hurry. That's what he's saying. He doesn't mean that, oh, they should happen next week. But he does mean that when they start, boy, they're going to go quick. That's what he's saying about the things that will shortly come to pass. It's the character of it when it happens. It's going to be speedy. It's going to happen one event right after another. Now let me bring it to a conclusion this morning. I just wanted to lay the foundation for the study of the book. Next week we'll begin to look at the book, first chapter of the book. I hope that you want the blessing, the promise of verse 3. Blessed is he that readeth, and they that hear the words of this prophecy, and keep those things that are written therein. I hope you want that. You recognize this is an open book. It's to be understood by Christians, and you want to understand it. And recognize that this book will give to us that assurance of the final victory of Jesus. You ever wonder, you know, is it worth it all? Boy, when you read this book, you'll say it's worth it all. Someday we're coming out ahead. We're with Jesus. We're going to rule and reign with him. He is King of kings and Lord of lords. And all that I go through down here right now, all the problems I have, they'll be very little compared to the blessing and the glory that'll be revealed then. Let's pray. Father, I pray that you will help us as we unveil, reveal the truth of this book, to understand it and apply it, that we might see Jesus in all of his glory and beauty and majesty, and worship him as King of kings and Lord of lords. I pray in his name. Amen.